and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. This week, our subject is Margaret of England.
One day we will be remembered.
Margaret was the second child of King Henry III of England and his wife, Eleanor of Provence, and was born at Windsor Castle. She was a girl, but she had an older brother named Edward, the future King Edward I, Hammer of the Scots. So she probably was just a minor disappointment. Margaret's first appearance in the historical record comes when she was just 3 years old, when she and her brother, the future Edward I, took part in an event in London. They were presented with scarlet robes trimmed with ermine. King Alexander II of England had previously been married to her paternal aunt, Joan of England, who herself has an episode. In 1244, her father, Alexander II, met in Newcastle to resume peaceful relations with the two nations, and it was decided that the future Alexander III of Scotland should marry Margaret. She was betrothed the same year. Her aunt was the unhappy first wife of her father-in-law. She had left Scotland when she was 26 because she was so over being the Queen of Scotland. Margaret was married on the 25th of December, 1251, when she was 11 years old, to King Alexander of Scotland, who was 10 years old. The couple remained in York until January the following year. Margaret is said to have been unhappy in Scotland and to have created some tension between England and Scotland by writing to her family in England that she was poorly treated in Scotland. Because of their age, it was not considered suitable for the royal couple to have sexual intercourse, thankfully, because they were very young. But Margaret was therefore not allowed to see Alexander very often, and because she had evidently been given a good impression of him during their time in York, and came to be very fond of him, this made her displeased. Furthermore, she did not like the royal castle and hated Edinburgh. And the climate in Scotland was not what she was used to. And she missed England and her family there, because she was just an 11-year-old little girl sent to be Queen of Scotland. She wrote of her homesickness and complaints to her parents, who asked for her to visit them. The Scots, however, refused permission because of the risk that she would never return. Because remember her Aunt Joan? That's exactly what she did. Went to England to visit and never returned because she didn't dig it. In 1255, Eleanor sent her physician to Edinburgh to investigate Margaret's well-being. He reported that she was pale and depressed and complained about loneliness and neglect. Her father sent a new delegation, wrote to some of his Scottish earls, and demanded that she be better treated. Queen Margaret complained to her father's envoys that she was kept as a prisoner, without the permission to travel, and that she was not allowed to see her spouse nor be intimate with him. Again, glad the children couldn't have sex, but it would have been nice if they could have at least been friends. After this, the King of England and the Regency Council of Scotland came to an agreement. It was decided that as the royal couple were now 14, they should be allowed to consummate their marriage, and the Regency Council would be obliged to turn over power to Alexander in 7 years' time, when Alexander would be 21. Alexander would be obliged to give Margaret physical attention. I don't like the word obliged, and allow her freedom to travel and visit her parents. This part I like. The same year, the 7th of September, 1255, Margaret and Alexander III visited her parents and Margaret's sister Beatrice, who was 21 months younger than her. Put a pin in Beatrice, she will come back. Margaret stayed a bit longer in England after her spouse's departure, but soon followed him when the agreement was secured. This must have been a relief for Scotland. Unlike her aunt, this queen returned. In 1257, Margaret and Alexander were captured and held prisoner by the Comyn family, who demanded the expulsion of all foreigners from Scotland. The Comyn family, remember that name. They will also be important. They were eventually released after the intervention of her father and the Scotland Regency Council. Her father, the King of England, may have been regretting his decisions right about now. Her older brother came to Scotland that same year to visit his distressed sister, and gifted her a squire. Now, I'm not a fan of international human trafficking, obviously, but it wasn't considered that then. This was a young man in training to be a knight, and it was seen as totally normal behavior. If we put it in today's terms, it would be seen like her brother gave her a guard dog puppy. He's little now, but someday he'll protect you if you train him. We know now that people are not an appropriate gift, but everyone, including the squire, wouldn't have thought this behavior odd. Remember this squire, we will revisit him soon. So back to Queen Margaret. 3 years after the birth of her first baby, Princess Margaret, she had her second baby, Prince Alexander. And just like that, Scotland had a new heir, baby Prince Alexander. With a little luck, he would become King Alexander IV. Spoiler alert, Scotland would never have a King Alexander IV. Not yet, anyway. Queen Margaret was not able to attend her father's funeral in 1272 because of her pregnancy. Queen Margaret was expecting again, and she would have this baby and survive the royal birth. The newest addition to the family was Prince David, the spare. Okay, back to the gifted squire. Remember him? Of international human trafficking fame? Okay, so before he belonged to Queen Margaret, he belonged to Margaret's brother, Prince Edward. During this time, word on the street was that the squire killed Queen Margaret and Prince Edward's uncle. So maybe that created bad blood. But he reportedly did it on the orders from her brother. So maybe he was just seen as super loyal. Like, that guy will kill your uncle if you tell him to. He had been part of an assassination squad. Her brother could have sent him to Scotland to shield him from powerful enemies in England. I'm guessing it was the second one, but there was some drama, so let me know what you think. The year after Queen Margaret had her third baby, she was walking along the river with her ladies, while recovering from her son's birth. Queen Margaret saw this squire by the river with one of his servants. She jokingly told her ladies to shove him in the river. Jokingly because they thought it was funny, not that she didn't mean it. Her ladies were in, and they pushed the squire into the river. His servant immediately jumped into the river to help his boss. And they both drowned. They got caught up in a swift current and couldn't recover. So that's awkward. The Queen of Scotland just killed a squire who was human trafficked to her by her brother and was rumored to have killed her uncle on her brother's orders. And when you put it all together like that, it sounds real bad. She reportedly told her confessor that it was a joke, and they were all laughing until they realized what had happened. Margaret was reportedly very upset by the incident. So what do you think? Tragic accident or premeditated murder? I think it was an accident. He had lived with her for the last 6 years. I'm sure there were many opportunities to kill him. Why pick that way? It just doesn't strike me as a fully formed plan, but let me know what you think. So the next year was her brother's coronation. He was already King Edward I, but now he's going to be anointed in front of God. Queen Margaret and King Alexander went to England for the coronation. How do you think that conversation went? Remember that guy that killed our uncle for you and then you gave to me? Oops. It probably didn't come up. He was busy becoming a crowned king. But how awkward. After the coronation, Margaret returned to Scotland. Not for long, though, because just 6 months after the coronation, she died. I don't know what she died from. She was survived by her husband, Alexander, and 3 children, Margaret, Alexander, and 3-year-old David. If you listen to Marie de Coussy's episode, you probably see the storm clouds coming because this episode is entirely encapsulated by the last one. And that is where I'll leave it for now. What did you think about Margaret of England? It kind of halted abruptly and it wasn't very long, but the information we have was pretty thought-provoking. She was born a princess, became a queen at 11. She died at the age of just 34. You may have learned last week that all 3 of her children will also soon be deceased within the next 9 years. None of her children ended up ruling Scotland. So who's going to follow her husband? Stay tuned and find out. Thanks for listening. Share with friends. Tell someone you appreciate them today. Long live to all the queens out there, and until next week, bye.
Will be remembered.
Thanks for listening.